Hello and welcome to HD's weekly talk show, The Interview, and our special segment, Life and Times with HD. He holds Congress's Priyanka Gandhi in high esteem, and yet he was labeled a Sanghi, so to speak. When he cross examined senior politician George Fernandez, he could not look him straight in the eye. A former chief minister told him, "I don't mind going to jail, but please save my son." Apart from defending India's wildlife poacher, Sansar Chand, he also stood with the accused in a sexual harassment case. That apart, the Nirbhaya gang rape case and the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case are others that he has fought. We are talking about senior advocate Sidharth Luthra, the only lawyer who has handled 3 impeachments. He's here with us in this edition of The Interview. We take him down memory lane in our special segment, Life and Times with HT. Meet senior advocate Sidharth Luthra. Welcome to the show, Mr. Sidharth Luthra, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with you.
Let me begin from the beginning. You are, by all accounts, a sentimental man. There are memories of your grandfather, of your great grandfather as well. And there are others that form part of a book dedicated to your mother. And above all, you have your father's refugee card still with you. And I see you're wearing a blazer, your school sports blazer. Take me through all that.
So, both my parents were from refugee families. My dad's family were holidaying this side of the border, and suddenly they were penniless. Though I was born 20 years after partition, it struck me in the later years that we rarely used the word independence at home. It was always partition. So, that's something that struck with me. I've also seen the struggles of my father, my grandfather. The struggle of that decade post 47 was something which did take, I would say, a toll on the family. But at the same time, my grandparents, my father, my mother, they persevered. And a lot of what I have been able to do in my life is because of their hard work and their blessings. We had a farm. One of my fond memories is that we had a tractor, Russian sky blue tractor, DT14, I still remember. And I used to chase my grandfather that I want to drive it. And he used to say, "How can you drive it?" I was 8, 9 at the time. So one day, finally, when I became 11, I managed to convince one of the staff that, I should be allowed to drive it. And my grandfather, of course, came on the scene and everybody got a piece of his mind. But I started and I tried to drive it. And lo and behold, I was almost flying off and I was just trying to hold on to the handle for dear life that I wouldn't fly off. So that was my time in the farm.
That was also where you learnt the Punjabi word for chini.
Yes, ma'am. One day when I was alone with one of the young boys, one of the helpers' children to look after me, I wanted sugar in my milk. So I told him chini and he wouldn't understand. And then after a series of attempts, he finally told me, he said, "Babuji, khand kyun nahi kiya?" And I looked very silly. I felt very foolish. And I said, if this is the language of my forefathers, I must learn it. And that's when I learned Punjabi. And I would say I speak fairly chaste Punjabi. The other thing is I grew up with my grandfather because when he shifted here, he was at a bit of a loose end. You leave a 50-acre farm plus 50 staff.
And he refused the land which was given to him in exchange because he said the people there were uncouth.
That was way back in 47 when he was getting land near Delhi, near Bahadurgarh. And he says, look, I can't live here.
You also grew up listening to your grandfather reciting the Guru Granth Sahib to you.
Yes. One of the strong traditions in the family was that he would, even in the village, he would read the Granth Sahib. He would go to the Gurdwara every day. And when he shifted here, my dad suggested that we get a Granth Sahib. It was installed at home. And every day, winters 4 p.m., summer 5 p.m., I would give him a cup of tea and he would make me sit down and he would make me listen while he was reading the Granth Sahib.
What about the book which you later dedicated to your mother? And what about keeping still in safe custody your father's refugee card?
I've retained not only my grandfather's refugee card, I also have this blazer of my father's, which is from his sporting. One of the few things he could get from partition, a badge, as you can see, from FC College for athletics. So he was athletics blue. And this was a blazer which he got. He got a coat made, and now I have the coat which I wear. I have my grandmother's kirpan with which she used to cut kada prashad. I have the kullas which we wear in turbans in all the weddings in the family. And the book was actually a book of photographs. So we got a home in the hills and my mother and I would be there almost a month and a half every year. During those period, I took a number of photographs. A couple of friends suggested I make a book out of them. And I started this process in 2019. And those photographs are really a collection of my time spent with her. So this was a book which was dedicated to her.
Your great-grandfather was told by Sir Sobha Singh, let's go to Delhi and build the capital together. Tell me about that.
So this is something which came from my grandfather, that they'd exchanged turbans and which was the mark of respect. When the capital was being made, my great-grandfather was also in the construction, who was also agriculturist, but he used to do construction and canals, projects, etc. Was told, look, brat chalo, naal chal mere naal, Delhi bana diya. So my great-grandfather was very self-satisfied. He said, main ki jaake karanga, ithe bahut kuch hai. One would have never thought that partition would happen.
So now that you live in the same capital which your great-grandfather was supposed to build, what does it take? What does it mean? And what would you say to yourself? You wish he had built it?
So I think at one part of me wishes that he would have shifted there at the right time, built the capital. You know, one would have felt a lot more. One would have felt a
Connected.
part of the history. But at the same time, I am very, very satisfied about the roots of my family, the roots of my father from Khanewal, the culture, the life, the conversations, the stories, Heer Ranja, which is the legacy which I carry inside.
You know, you studied maths, but ended up practicing law. Just tell me about that. And you were pretty good in maths.
Yes, I was good in school maths. When I reached university, I found it interesting, but it became very dry, too dry for me. After the second year, I just felt it was not for me. I got into law, which was really a default option. Went to Cambridge, did a master's in criminology. My passion is still to teach. Had I not lost my father, I would perhaps have been in the academic world.
On a lighter note, you did programs in the All India Radio because you wanted money to buy expensive gifts for your girlfriends. And I'm not going to take any names.
I can't deny that, of course. But yes, I also did because I enjoyed it. I think when you're young, you have friends and girlfriends who have good taste. Then as a young man, you can't go running to your parents all the time. Sometimes I think I did. I landed up doing some 18 duties in a night, which got me a lot of grief at home, but I still used to enjoy my time.
Your father-in-law believed in astrology and you were married in a akhada.
So my father-in-law was an IAS officer, but he had this great belief in astrology. He believed that Ketki, my wife, and I should be married after the 15th of January 1993. Otherwise, there will be issues. My grandfather was alive. He fell very ill on the 31st of December 92. And we had to prepone the wedding. And the only place we could arrange, all our bookings at Gymkhana Club at the Air Force Auditorium all came to naught. And Ketki and I got married in a akhada, which is right next to our home.
But why a akhada?
We didn't have time. And that is how it happened. It was also a place where I used to occasionally go to exercise because that was also where I did my training as a judo. So that was the most convenient. easily accessible, and we could turn it out in 3 days' time.
During your days of struggle and when things were a little better, you decided to buy a car, but realized that a credit card is not given to a lawyer and banks don't trust lawyers.
At that time, things were very peculiar. We were thinking of a car. The vehicle we thought we could afford an installment on was a Hyundai Santro, and that car was going to cost us 3,425 rupees per month installment, but with a down payment of 1 lakh. We had 25,000 rupees. So how do you raise the rest of the money? So I always say Ketki and I could afford one tire. One tire my mother paid for, one tire my brother-in-law Rakesh paid for, and one tire my childhood friend Rashi paid for. And that is how we bought that car. Getting a loan was a challenge, whether it be lawyers, whether it be police officers, politicians, and even your variety, that journalists, they would never get loans because people thought that we were the kind of people who would never pay up.
I can now see a Maybach. So you've come a long way.
Yes, things have come a long way. Destiny smiled on us.
There is another story about your father's car.
I have my father's car. My dad had a Mercedes. It's a 190D sterling condition, and I've maintained it with passion because it is the memory of my late father. People often laugh and tell me that, you have put more money into this than most people put into a new car.
Do you drive it?
Yes, we drive it. It is started every day. And when Mercedes-Benz launched the new 190D, this car was taken on a flatbed to Missouri for the launch because it is the first of its kind and in mint condition.
Now coming to your cases, the most serious aspect of your life. You're the only lawyer who has handled, in fact, handling still one out of the 3 impeachment cases. Take me through those, the twists and the turns, and what it takes.
This was a Calcutta High Court judge. It was challenging from 2 perspectives. The judge had secured an honorable order to say that he had done no wrongdoing from the division bench of the Calcutta High Court. So we had to search deep and get information which was not before the Calcutta High Court, and then meet the challenge because his argument was, I have been exonerated by the division bench of the High Court. You cannot now proceed against me. But with a lot of effort, we were able to put out credit card slips. We were able to put out personal vouchers. We were able to put out book purchases. And those turned the table to say that a person who is a lawyer was entrusted with money, public money, as a receiver, utilizes that money for personal gain, then becomes a judge and does not account for it. That went to Parliament. He was a great orator. It was in Rajya Sabha when he did an outstanding job. And in the evening, the late Arun Jaitley called me up, said, Sidharth, there is an issue. Please come and see me in the evening. So I, along with my colleagues, we went, and he had all the records, and he says, look, how do we deal with it? So since we were so familiar with the record, we just pulled out the credit card slips, the Citibank vouchers, the personal checks, and placed it. And that was the end of the story, because the next day they turned the debate around, and the Rajya Sabha, which was about to exonerate him, indicted him. Later he resigned. The second case was, in a sense, tougher. It was of a judge called Justice Ganguly in Madhya Pradesh High Court. This is a case I was doing for the judge. The first was for the committee for the government, and this was a case of an allegation of sexual impropriety.
In fact, I'm going to talk to you about your standing up for the alleged accused and not the victim, but we'll come to that later.
Exonerated accused, ma'am, now, not alleged any longer, exonerated.
All right.
We had to cross-examine witnesses, including a former judge of the Supreme Court. I was able to get the judge off completely. All charges were dropped by the committee. Once charges are dropped, the matter does not go to the House because that's where it ends.
So before I come to the third case, which you are still fighting or representing, let me ask you, why did you, in the first place, take up a case and fight for the now exonerated accused and not stand for the victim?
The victim was a student of Delhi University of Relief, but I had no connection, and the judge reached out to me through another formal judicial officer. I have always believed that in a civilized society, in a system which is governed by rule of law, everybody has the right to be represented. The day we as lawyers start making a value judgment, somebody's guilty, then I have no right to represent them because that's being unfair. But everybody deserves a chance. I have represented people who may be accused of the most heinous of crimes, but then I've also appeared in the Nirbhaya case for the state. It pains me when people ask, how can you do this?
I'm going to ask you, how can you do this? Sexual harassment is sensitive. And normally, the sympathy, and I'm saying sympathy, not the law or not the legal points, lie with the victim. How can you do it?
You're absolutely right. So the point is this: as long as you play by the rules, you work within the corners of the law, corners of the law of evidence, corners of the law of procedure, you give the accused a fair defense. Otherwise, if we were to take the sensitivity to a level, then the moment there is an allegation of sexual harassment or sexual impropriety, you might as well lock the person and throw away the key. But that's not the system.
Is that the same logic you used when you fought for Sansar Chand, the poacher and India's biggest wildlife offender, if I may use strong words? And a related question, by this logic, would you have fought for Ajmal Kasab?
Yes, I would have. Had I been asked to represent him, I would have represented him. And I must tell you, I used to do a lot of wildlife work, not only for Satsang Chand, but many other people. That time it was also a question of, I needed the money. And also I felt I should defend them. I didn't feel anything wrong.
Was your gut feeling that he has erred and he's made a mistake?
I think he was very candid about things. Let me leave it at that. Also, he was hyped up to be a much larger figure. I think he was a mid-level guy who became a superstar, and he lent himself to that image. I mean, he couldn't even write his name. He could just write almost straight lines and would write Sansar. But a fascinating chap, simple, rustic, with a very sharp brain. The cases against Sansar was that he was actually not a poacher himself, but he was a trader, and he would trade in skins, in bones. Somewhere along the way, China became importer of tiger bones. So more than the skin, the value lay in the bones. Of course, I must tell you, another of my clients told me an anecdote which was a fact, where he said, look, we don't have enough tiger bones to send out. So what we do is we take buffalo and bones and we put them in water, which is, which in chai ka pani. So they get that hue, and it's one portion of tiger bones and 4 portions of cow and buffalo bones. But then milawat is something which we are unfortunately quite well known for, aren't we?
But tell me, this logic you used all the while, that everyone needs to be defended, and by that measure, you also said that you would have defended Ajmal Kasab, though I don't agree with you there, but however. But then that logic turned on its head later, and now you don't use that logic when it comes to wildlife poachers.
So I think everybody is entitled to change their philosophy of life. From 2012 till now, I spent a lot of time in the hills, and my passion for forests, for the environment in the last 15, 20 years has made me change my views. And therefore now I would represent organizations which are concerned with protecting the environment, with protecting wildlife, with protecting animal life. I use my legal skills to follow a passion. And once I'm following that passion, I think defending people on the other side is not the ethical thing to do if my heart is not there.
So if Sansar Chand were alive and he were to come back to you, what would you say to him? Yes or no?
No. I would excuse myself.
So the third impeachment case, how much can you tell me? Can you tell me anything?
So I can only tell you this, that it relates to a judge of the Delhi High Court who is facing action because it is alleged that there was currency found which was burnt, and later on it is alleged to have been cleaned away. He is undergoing an impeachment process, but because there is a restriction by the committee to speak about the proceedings of the committee, I would not like to get into further details.
The big picture. What does it take to handle impeachment cases? It's not like any other case. It's not like a client or, what does it take? Is it a battle of nerves?
Yes, of course. There are 2 levels of challenge, 3 levels. One, you're dealing with uncharted territory. Secondly, because this area of the law is not developed. When we did Soumitra Sen's case, we had to look at law all over the world to build a case. because the question was, what are the standards expected of judges? The second one was a little simpler because the charges were specific. The third one, again, the issue is what is, because if you test somebody on the standard of propriety, then how do you test them? So the point is that there is a higher standard than either in civil law and criminal law. And of course, there is intense pressure in any such case to perform. There's a lot of nervousness that you should not underperform, because how will posterity judge you?
So, when you take up these cases, or when you decided or they came your way, did you have a conscience burden? Was it should I not? Or you just jumped into it saying, I have to?
So the first time I was actually prosecuting the judge, that was for the government. The second came my way because I'd done the first and possibly the third also. But again, I believe that it is important that we defend the judicial institution against attacks. And in giving judges a fair defense in such proceedings, we are also doing, according to me, a service to the institution. You can't leave people defenseless.
So, given a choice or looking back, if they came your way again, or if history repeats itself, I hope it doesn't in cases of impeachment, but if it does, you would still say yes?
Yes, of course, ma'am.
Without a second thought?
Yes, of course. Unless I have a conflict, that is to say, I've touched a file on the other side.
You handled Arvind Kejriwal's defamation case, and you actually advised Mr. Arun Jaitley not to sue Kejriwal.
Here's the thing, Ran Karanjawala put me on the line, and Mr. Jaitley said, will you do the defamation, criminal defamation? My instant reaction was, sir, do you really want to file? Because he was an honorable man. I didn't want him to get involved in criminal defamation. But he asked, and there was no way I could have said no to a senior. So I did it. I prosecuted Mr. Kejriwal. The matter ended finally with Mr. Kejriwal issuing an apology. But I must say one thing more. Despite this start with Arvind Kejriwal, whenever he met me socially, he was the epitome of grace.
Not only that, he also cleared your bills later.
He cleared substantial bills, which so I used to represent the Congress government in Punjab, which he replaced. My bills, about a large amount of bills were stuck. So I spoke to Mr. Kejriwal, and he was so prompt. Within 1 week, he got the bills cleared.
But tell me, why did you advise Mr. Arun Jaitley not to sue Kejriwal?
I would say it's not for people who have a thin skin. It is for people with a very thick hide, because the moment you step into the witness box, you can be put all kind of random questions about your reputation, your family, your credibility, and it's a free-for-all. So for a person who's always lived their life with dignity and honor, I would not recommend a criminal defamation.
Because of one of your cases that you handled, there was also an attempt on your life.
So Varun Gandhi had given a hate speech. I represented him. In a bizarre offshoot of this, the Chota Shakil people took out a contract, and I was the subject of contract, and the value of my life was 1,50,000 odd. Fortunately, I'm still alive.
You know, like Kejriwal, the Gandhis are in the eye of a storm. Yet, you have good things to say about Priyanka Gandhi, who you hold in high esteem. And at the same time, you are labeled a Sanghi or a BJP wala, if I may use the term.
I was labeled a Congress wala because I was an additional Solicitor General in the Congress government. Later, I defended Mr. Jaitley. Since I do work for people of all ilk, I represent governments, whether it be Congress governments, Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. I represent both DMK, IDMK. I represent whoever comes to me. So I've got tired of unknowing what all I'm labeled for. Perhaps it changes from time to time.
You've played down your connection or the BJP wala term because in your student days in college, you were in touch with Mr. JP Nadda and you interacted with him.
Yes, I didn't want to play down. I was in university politics. I was approached by the ABVP, the Akhil Bharati Vidyarthi Parishad, met them, interacted with them, with Mr. Nadda as also, and Govindacharya. I remember visiting that office, but after that, I did law, was not in university politics, so I was not relevant to anybody. It's strange that people label me like this because they forget that I did the Tehelka Commission when the NDA government was in power.
I'm going to come to that. And that is when you cross examined Mr. George Fernandez, and you were so nervous that you could not look him in the eye.
He and my father were the closest of friends. I got into the Tehelka Commission just by freak chance. When it came to cross-examining Mr. Fernandez and show that defense dealers had access to his home, open access. It was challenging because of the personal and family connect. The man had picked me up on his lap often enough as a child. So the next day when the cross-examination happened, I did not want to make eye contact with him to start with because I felt I may get emotional. Midway into the cross-examination, he turned to Justice Venkateswamy and said, "Do you know who this young man is?" Justice Venkateswamy was surprised at this turn of events. And then Mr. Fernandez says, "His father, Mr. K.K. Luthra, defended me in emergency when nobody would touch me. The irony is today he is cross-examining me."
What did that do to you?
My eyes became moist. It took me a couple of moments to get back my balance.
Apology may be a strong word, but when you met him outside court and later, did you express or feel regret at doing just the opposite of what your father had done to Fernandez?
I had no regret in what I did because I thought that I felt I was clear in my mind that I had a duty to do. But my concern was, would I be able to do it fairly and effectively because of the emotional connect in the background, the family connect.
Another interesting aspect about politicians you have dealt with is their worry about their kids. A former chief minister, I will not name, you can if you want, he said to you, "I don't mind going to jail, but save my son." Also, a former chief minister's wife said the same thing. So tell me about both.
I started interacting with the late Prakash Singh Badal Saab, I think 2002-3, when they had troubles, when the Congress government was in power. When I met him and I told him, they were not, that you will have to surrender before the court. So his statement was, मैं ते 17 साल जेल च कड्ढे ने, मैनू सुखबीर दी चिंता है. I protected him all along. Later, coincidentally, in Punjab, the same thing was said by Maharani Praneeth Kaur regarding her son when there was another matter on. And I've seen this. I think all of us, various politicians, all of us, including myself, are very protective of our children, aren't we? But one more thing about Badal Saab, which I must say. I think over a point of time, he remembered my number, but he had forgotten my name, or he didn't care to, he would send, I would get a client almost every month. And that was the time my practice was growing, saying, Badal Saab has sent us. He said, go to the young lawyer. In Punjabi, he said, Jawan Vakil kol jao, a number hai, mera na le lena. And people would call me up and say, this is the number we've been given. Tusi Jawan Vakil, are you the young lawyer? And I would say, yes, I am. Though by that time, I'd done about 12 years in the profession.
And what about Praneeth Kaur?
Again, the same thing. I think we met, if I recall correctly, in a bus at Chandigarh airport, and we started conversing about an ongoing matter. And when I was chatting about her, about the case, she told me, she says, you tell me, will my son be all right? Eventually, the matter ended properly, safely for him. But she was concerned, I think,
less about her husband and more about the son, if I may put it.
I'll just say she was focused completely on her son.
All right, that's another way of putting it, but basically that was it. But coming to Chandrababu Naidu, it was not children, son, save my son. It was more the iPad story.
I think it was 8th September 2023 when he was arrested. And I'm sitting with him and I had an iPad, trying to figure out a strategy. When Mr. Naidu turns to me and said, Mr. Luthra, you do all your work on the iPad? I said, yes, sir. After this is over, I want you to come and train the TDP legal cell on the use of technology. And I'm thinking to myself, this gentleman is facing possibly one of the biggest challenges of his life. But look at the forward-looking approach he has. He always wants improvement and reform.
You've been a counsel for the National Investigation Agency and handled militant funding. Just tell me how it works.
So here is how it works. Post Burhan Wani's death, there was a lot of stone pelting. So the new way, the rage became stone pelting. Now, money is raised through cross-border trade. Money is raised by sending children, used to be raised rather, by sending children to Pakistan for education and on their fees refunded. And money is in the cross-border trade is the differential. And then money is also brought in through Hawala networks. That money was then distributed through certain organizations and reach the stone pelters who would then disturb public peace, and that is the mechanism by which law and order used to break down in Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, there used to be a calendar of protests that which day where protests would be done, and through word of mouth and through connectivity, people would gather there and the funds would reach so that people would be paid to do that work.
And now, before I let you go, the two big cases, Rajiv Gandhi assassination and the Nirbhaya case.
So I'll begin with Nirbhaya. When it came to the Supreme Court, I had to iPad for the state, and it went on for 9 months. The evidence was solid, but towards the end, I had a challenge. For the three accused, I was concerned about asking for the death penalty for one of them. I took 4 weeks to re-examine the entire evidence. This time around, when I read the evidence, I was clear. So we did ask for the death penalty and get it. What troubled me was that when the death penalty was announced, there was an uproar in the crowd. That was something that really disturbed me.
Just explain that to me.
So people started clapping and cheering. It was a serious moment. The case arose out of the rape and death of one and injuries to the other, but at the same time, 3 people were being hanged.
Didn't they deserve to be hanged? And hence, cheering, maybe a harsh word to use, was probably the possible consequence. I won't say in order, but probably the possible consequence.
Ma'am, I think in the Supreme Court, in a courtroom full of lawyers, we can't be so bloodthirsty. We have to show a level of depth and maturity. The consequence, you're right on. The consequence would have been death penalty, and it was upheld. But the reaction was something which I personally feel was unfortunate. I have absolutely no regrets about arguing that matter and seeking the death penalty.
In fact, I was just going to ask you that at a personal and emotional level, were you dispassionate when you were handling this case? How much were your emotions involved? What did it take as a human being and, of course, a lawyer?
In all cases of such grave cruelty, whether you're representing one side or the other, you have to come to terms with the nature of evidence. The evidence, if it's photographic, can be very gory. The evidence which, there are videos, there's photographic evidence, you have to actually, absorb it, deal with it, and present it in the corners of the law. But you can't let yourself get swayed by it. You can't let your emotions get the better, because sometimes if that happens, you lose track of what you have to do as a lawyer.
Okay. The Rajiv Gandhi assassination case.
I joined the government on 6th of July 2012. Thereafter, a joint secretary from the government came and handed this file to me, and it was a very big case. Unfortunately, it did not come up for the next 1.5 years. The matter came up for hearing. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court came out with a judgment which really set the trend and which was a pathbreaker on long incarceration on death row. And the conclusion in that judgment impacted the Rajiv Gandhi assassin's case completely.
Which was that if they are there for a long time on the death row, it should be converted to life imprisonment. Is that right?
Absolutely, ma'am. So this was what we were facing. And I still remember the challenge was that when the matter initially came up for hearing, I had a problem getting instructions.
Just explain both these to me.
I tried the then Law Minister's office, couldn't get through. Tried the Home Secretary's office, no clear response. What pained me was that not just for a party, for the nation, the death of a former Prime Minister is a very important thing, and it should be a matter given the highest importance. Not only was it not, but the matter just remained lingering in the files, and it was only when President Pranab Mukherjee came that he cleared out all these files. there was no reason for that decision to be deferred for 10, 11 years. So it was initially the BJP government, thereafter the Congress government.
So let me end on a lighter and personal note. Of course, the part about when you couldn't afford a car, we've spoken about. But your wife, in those days and years of struggle, wore only black and white. Just give me the logic.
We had little money. The way to be decently dressed, both in the day and the evening, was buy black and white, don't buy colors. Nobody will get to know the difference.
On that note, Mr. Sidharth Luthra, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and thank you for being here with us and taking us through these very, very interesting and challenging cases.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's a great honor to be here on this show with you. I never thought I'd ever get a chance to sit with you like this.
Thank you.